So my presentation today really is about going global. As Les said, I've been working in international business my whole career, and I founded International Directions with some other people that really, when we started doing this, we're really looking at the international business arena and the resources out there. And some of the questions and things that companies were asking us is, how do I go global? What are some of the things that we as an organization need to do to set ourselves up for success as we try to make our company, a global organization? So the presentation today is really meant to be a step-by-step guide, but it will depend on industry. Are you a professional organization? Are you a consumer-based organization? And the goal of the presentation really is to give you a foundation of what some of the steps are that you need to do to ensure global success for your organization. So going global. Les, next slide.
You got it.
So when you want to really think about going global, what does that mean? What is global? Some people use international, some people use global. Well, the global marketplace, if you really think about it for a moment, the standard definition for international business is any business that is done in two or more localities, two or more countries, two or more city-states. Global business is meant to encompass the globe, the actual thought of having your business operating, thriving with customers, covering the entire globe, not just from one country to another. So the definition also, I think, in recent years has taken a different turn. It's actually become more encompassing, meaning it's not just to be a global organization. It takes more than just having an office in 2 or 3 or 4 more countries. Being a global organization actually means making changes and being inclusive and being dynamic. So it's not so much that you have offices and you impact the local area that you are, but that you allow that local area to impact your business as well, meaning your organization is dynamic and it's inclusive. And when you do that, true growth or true global growth really occurs. Okay, next slide, Les. So why, when we look at businesses, whether you're, in clean tech, or you're a medical device company. I'm sorry, Les, it was Why Go Global? The one right before? No, right? Why Go Global? Thank you. When you look at, more and more companies going global, you ask yourself, or wanting to be part of the global arena, why go global? What is the benefit of going global? Should my organization go global? We're small, we have limited resources. Or there are some specific things that you can do to analyze your potential in new geographies. So one of the things that I hear over and over and over again is, why go global? Well, if you're not a global organization, you can rest assured that your competition is, or that they will be. And if you're not doing global business, your competition will be before you are. So that's kind of a common theme that we hear in any new platform, any new business, any new type of way of doing business, especially with social media today. You hear, if you're not doing social media, you can bet your competition is. But is that really an opportunity? Because someone else is doing it, does that mean you should? Well, here are some other things. Next slide, Les. That we can look at when we determine how we're going to analyze a market. Is there an opportunity? How should a company proceed with global expansion plans? Well, for me, I always start with research. Yes, it's important. And when I say research, I don't necessarily mean the books or the reports you get from the Gartner Group or anything like that. For me, research really starts with primary research. Do you know the people in the market? Do you know anyone in the market? What do you know about that market? What do you know about your competitors in that market? What do you know about the systems and taxes and regulatory? And most importantly, even though it's last on this list, but I think it's probably the most important, what are the cultural significance things that you need to pay attention to before entering that market. What are the cultural nuances that are very, very important and that will determine your success or some of the challenges that you have in that market? So, you know, I've worked for organizations where the CEO of a company announced that he wanted to have a direct business. That means without a distributor, without a sales partner in Japan. And this was a US company. He wanted to launch a direct business in Japan within 6 weeks. So I'm not sure who's in your audience today, Les, but all of those, especially I think your speakers today, will attest to the fact if you have not put things in place, procedures, legal, regulatory, marketing, compliance, years in advance, there's no way you're going to be launching in Japan in any method, in any way, in any business model in less than 6 weeks. So I think what I want to do with your audience today and with this presentation is really walk you through what can you do and how do you determine timelines and how do you determine if this is right for your business. So next slide, Les. This slide is really just to give you kind of an overview with everything that everyone's reading today. And I'd like to start off by apologizing to Elton in South Africa. If you notice, these are the heads, the president of Brazil, the current president of Russia, the prime minister of India, and the premier of China, representing the BRIC countries. But now South Africa is also included in there. So I should have had South Africa president as well. But these are what some analysts say, these are the emerging markets. These are the markets that you should be entering. Well, it depends. It depends on your area. As Les was pointing out today, when they're looking in the clean tech area and the things that they're doing, especially in Eastern Europe, well, those are also considered emerging economies that should be analyzed as well, especially in the clean tech arena. So next slide, Les. The opportunity. Well, the opportunity in determining is there an opportunity for your business, for your product in a new geography, some of the things that a lot of companies think, well, the opportunity, it's faster growth. We have a domestic customer base, but the minute we go into an international market, we will have an international customer base, potentially doubling, tripling, quadrupling, our sales growth. Okay, that's an opportunity. Perhaps in some cases you have cheaper inputs, raw materials or labors. Well, the world is changing, and the second bullet point is becoming very controversial. Another opportunity, the new market, as we discussed, a larger customer base, and potentially one of the things that I've witnessed the most is diversification, less vulnerability when your domestic business is taking a downturn. Sometimes you'll notice that the international business is actually on the upturn. And I noticed this a lot with organizations that are starting, that have perhaps been in the domestic business for 5 to 10 years, and then they go internationally. Their domestic business will take a little bit of a dip, but their international business, primarily because they're opening new markets and opening new customer base, will help them during those downturns. So next slide, Les. But on the converse of all this opportunity, you also have risk. With the opportunity to make more money, you also have the opportunity to spend more money. So you have increased cost. If you have a direct business, that's an increased cost in personnel, office space, storage. If you're going with a dealer model or a hybrid model or a partnership model, you still might have increased legal cost, increased marketing cost. The risk is also increased cost in terms of foreign regulation and standards, but more than a monetary cost, I think organizations really need to understand the resource impact it takes to get your product approved in multiple countries and the timeline that's going to take. You also may have cash flow woes. Starting up a new operation, investing in a new operation takes time, it takes money, it takes cash flow. And while you might not be generating income in that new geography, you're still going to need to pay for the services and for the work and for the launch that you're doing. You also have something in terms of operational complexity. When operating in multiple geographies, there's a there's something very specific in terms of how you ship your product, how you price your product, how you invoice your product, how you pay the, and then in terms of your finance, how your finance team decides to calculate that in your books through the end of the year, meaning are you going to repatriate those funds, or are they going to stay in country? So a lot of complexity and failure to understand local customs and norms in business. And this one for me is rather funny and not so funny. You've got a lot of issues with that, and I have a few real life examples that we're going to go over in a little while. Next slide. And in addition to the opportunity and the risk, you also have legal everything. And the legal aspect of it really does touch on every part of your business, from your marketing to your distribution, your employees. We did a little bit about repatriating money, but we also have to talk about currency exchange, dispute resolution. Really, really key, especially today, is IP protection, making language accessible.
All right, we're going through one of those. Let's see if we can wait it out a second, and I think the information is worthwhile. We got an What we got? It's like a whoops. There are certain places you don't want to hear whoops. One is in your dentist chair. And the other is here.
Can you hear me?
Now I can.
So I'm not sure when you lost me, but in terms of legal necessities, in terms of analyzing a market,
right in the middle by
that I pointed out that I've
dispute resolution.
Oh, dispute resolution. Okay. And remember, this is not an all-inclusive list. These are some of the high points of things that I noticed get overlooked or that don't get enough attention when analyzing a market. And then marketing language and tactics and product compliance. Dispute resolution. Okay. And remember, this is not an all-inclusive list. These are some of the high points I noticed get overlooked or don't when analyzing markets. Is that me? And then marketing language and tactics and product compliance. How's that?
That's better. Now there's only one of you.
I didn't even know I had that on still. Sorry about that. So in terms of marketing language and tactics, I thought I'd share a very funny story here. And this does touch upon the legal. It also touches on good taste, but it also touches on the legal aspect. I worked with a company that launched a campaign, and it was called the Naked Truth Campaign. It was a cosmetic medical device and dental company. And when they launched this campaign, they were trying to be shocking about research, and it really had nothing to do with anything but the pure research that they had done on this product. And their marketing campaign wanted you to think it was going to talk about, something or someone naked, but it didn't. It really did talk about the research. But the photography they used, the language they used was so offensive for, 60% of my global, of my markets and other geographies. I'll say international because it wasn't quite the global, but that they couldn't use this. And it was a US company, and the US team could not understand why this campaign wasn't as enticing and invigorating and considered, creative in these other countries. And it was very, very interesting when we talk about, in certain countries, I couldn't even use the word naked. In certain countries, who particularly, it's kind of interesting, you would assume with Brazil and everything that they would be the most easygoing. Well, the Brazilian organization refused to run the campaign because they had spent 2 years trying to establish the company as credible and professional and serious, especially for the professional doctors and dentists that they were working with. And here, the company launches with this campaign. So besides the legal issue, I think it goes also to the cultural issue and the nuances that do not translate, localize, and I think that's the key in this part.
So we're about to be taken off the air, right?
I'm sorry?
We're about to be taken off the air in God knows how many countries.
Oh, yes, absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Les. But that was funny. But another, in terms of legal compliance, and we have another, the same company actually had an office, a headquarter office in the US, had an office in the UK, a very successful office in the UK, but they were told from day one that their product was illegal in the UK. They decided to ignore this. Now, the reason, and they didn't just decide to ignore this because they were being overly arrogant. They decided to ignore this because all of their competitors who were selling similar products were up and running in the UK. And it all had to do with the concentration of hydrogen peroxide, I believe, in the product. And also the percentage of fluoride in the product as well. And the CEO and the regulatory person, they sat down with a whole group of people and all decided, we're going to ignore this like everyone else does. So while they decided to ignore it, the head of that office, the country manager, informed everyone, well, you can ignore it if you wish, and I'll ignore it with you because I'm willing to take that gamble. But this person had to actually sign and in the documents for certification, for compliance, had to be the legal representative for the organization in that company, in that country, which meant the head of that office could go to jail if the Trading Standards Office decided to prosecute. It did not happen then, but probably about 2 years with a different country manager, it did happen, and the office was not shut down, but that product was removed from all marketing, and they made some concessions with the trading standards. So just as much as the legal implication and what we find out in
Are we on or off? It's working. It must be on break. I think what we're going to do is we're going to suspend this part of the presentation. We're going to have Roxanne back. We're back?
I'm back.
Were we back?
Okay. So anyway, I'm not sure what you heard, but
Roxanne, let's see if we can't get through the balance of your presentation at this point, and then we can move forward with other stuff from there.
Okay. So let's go to regulatory slide. The most important part here really is that you know your local expert. Am I on?
Yep.
Okay. Use an expert, use an expert, use an expert. I cannot stress enough how important this is. There are certain parts of going international or doing business in general that you can fix a little bit later if you made a wrong turn in your marketing and your messaging. You can change those. You can change maybe how many people you've allocated to this resource or that resource. But regulatory isn't one of those easy changes. When you make an initial regulatory mistake, it can take thousands of dollars, millions of dollars in some cases, but thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars. It can take years, it can take time, and you can make mistakes that can potentially take you out of the market. An example, a US company that had an operation in Germany had a product that was approved in Europe. So again, the German office said, well, you're approved in Europe, you have your CE mark, but there are special regulations for Germany that we have to adhere to in terms of packaging. The company ignored those because they thought the CE mark and their CE approval would override any German objections. Well, it didn't. And one of their competitors in the German market actually turned them in, and they were actually taken off the market for 6 months, their largest European market for 6 months. Huge cost to the organization. Then Les, if we can proceed to finances and taxes. Am I still online?
Yes, you are.
Okay, so I'm going to rush through this part. These are some of the basic things that you would do, I think, in most businesses. You have your budget, you have your forecast, your cash flow management, but in international and trying to go global and be that global organization, cash flow is probably even more important because you are going to have the issues with maybe the way local payments are done compared to your headquarter office in your home country that is going to impact how much money, how much cash flow is needed at one specific time. Again, repatriation of profits is a huge issue and needs to really be dealt with experts in the local market or global experts. Do not use, if you are a U.S. organization and you have your CFO or your finance team primarily dealing with U.S. transactions, and maybe did one bank transfer. Those are not the people to be deciding format or form or compliance in these issues. Again, import tax plus sales tax, a certain doesn't necessarily 2 + 2 does not always equal 4. So have an expert look at your numbers. Have an expert really understand what your budget looks like. Local taxes on profit, local payments, alternatives, and issues. Again, currency exchange is just a huge thing to look at. Les, next slide, please. But probably, in my opinion, one of the most important issues that I think, because it's not financial, gets overlooked is culture. How important is culture in doing, having an international or global business? Well, it is huge. There are so many mistakes that people make in terms of not understanding the culture of the new, locality they're in or the new country that they want to be in. This picture here is American CEO Chip Starnes. He was a CEO of a specialty medical supplies group, I think out of Massachusetts. And he is not in jail. This is a picture. He looks like he's in jail, but he's not. This is a photo of him in his office, I believe, in Beijing, China. And this is the story that was out a couple of weeks ago about an American CEO held hostage by his Chinese workers. They didn't hurt him or anything, but the situation was that he has an American manufacturer in China, has an office and manufacturing facility in China, decides that for whatever reasons, cost are increasing in China, that they're going to also open operations in India and transfer some of their production to India. So they laid off a few people, maybe, I don't remember if it was 20 or 30 people, and the remaining workers, they were told that they would keep their jobs. Well, severance packages were given to those who were laid off. Well, the people who stayed were very suspicious. They've seen lots of foreign companies come and open offices in China and then leave, or do something and they lose their jobs. So they decided to hold him hostage and during the negotiation process and make sure he negotiated fairly and according to them, fairly of what the compensation should be. So in my opinion here, and I've read a lot about this, the Chinese authorities did not get involved because they don't like to get involved in labor disputes. The U.S. government, and the embassy there, they were trying to help as much as possible. I believe the one thing that the Chinese government did do was make sure that he was given fresh water and 3 meals a day. And I think he was there for about 5 days. He did end up signing a resolution that all of the remaining employees not only got, they got the same severance packages as the employees who were laid off. And what's important here isn't the severance package or the fact that he had to prepay a severance package. What's important here is that somewhere the communication, the translation, the understanding of the impact of a layoff and how it was handled wasn't done to the satisfaction of his workers. Now, I've been in contact with one of my partners out of Denver, and a lot of talk about this, and they did a blog on this whole topic. And you have something when you do business in China that is essentially a translator, but your translator business partner. It's kind of your agent. It's kind of your guide to help you through the whole process. And their take on this is that, you need to really understand when you do international business when there are such sensitive topics and sensitive, you're offering someone a job, you're taking a job away. So it's a life-changing involvement, and layoff and relationship to company to work is different for Americans as it would be for someone in China, how they're, allowed to consider a job. And that perhaps this American company didn't really understand all of those nuances with their personalized agent in tow. So it'll be interesting to see how this impacts other organizations, because this isn't a new situation. It was just very highly visible and in the media. But again, something was lost there. There are cultural themes and nuances that are key to understanding your market and where you're going to do business and how you're going to do business in that market. And remember that your headquarter values and culture doesn't necessarily translate to the local culture and the local values. So just something to really, really pay attention. And the more you know, the better off you're going to be. And the better your local guides and the better advice you get, and the better you'll do. So next slide. Then we go, am I still there?
You are.
Okay, evaluation. So in evaluating these markets, we've talked about analyzing the markets. Now, those are just certain things that I think really need to be stressed in your evaluation, but in your analysis. But now let's evaluate some of those things. So next slide. We should be on the more than the P's slide.
You're there.
Okay. So, when you're doing an evaluation and when you're really analyzing and you're creating a business plan and you're doing your market research and you start your marketing plan, everyone says, oh, you got to pay attention to your 4 Ps, your product, your price, your promotion, the place, which is basically the distribution. But it's more than that. There is something that transcends the written word on the page of the research that you've done for, your CEO or for your launch team. That it is not easily understandable unless you've actually visited the place you're going to do business, or you've spoken to someone, or had some type of experience in that country, in that environment with your product. So I give you an example of a medical device company that had a product that was used in the US a certain way, meaning they had, I think it was a dental product, and this dental product was used by dentists. Well, in the United States, the dental operatories are rather large. You have a dentist, you have an hygienist, you have a dental, maybe 2 or 3 dental assistants, depending on the size of the office. In the UK, you probably have a dental nurse. In different countries, you have different things. Well, in France, only the dentist is allowed to put their hands inside a patient's mouth. No dental nurse, no dental assistant. You can have an office manager, you can have someone else organizing things, but in order to touch the patient's mouth, you have to be a dentist. So the product didn't do very well, because the whole marketing around the product was that the dentist would have to do very little, that the dental assistants could be growing this business, using this product, increasing their sales and their revenue. And in France, it was a complete failure. Well, no one bothered to check and to look and to see. They did their research on competitors, they did their research on the product, they did research on pricing and how it was being promoted and what the distribution channels were, and not a single person bothered to see or bothered to check or bothered to research how a real dental office operated in France. Huge loss, huge mistake, but again, these are one of those mistakes that's correctable once you do understand that. But it took 2 years to correct that mistake compared to other countries. So next slide, Les, the market. Again, this is going beyond the 4 Ps, but really understanding your market. Who are you, if you are selling in a professional environment, who's buying your product? Who's using your product? How are they buying it and how are they using it? And that will not be the same in every location that you're in. It will definitely be different when you're in international geographies. The other thing I tell people, especially when you're going to regions of the world, Europe is not a country. And, Latin America is not a country. There are some commonalities, there may be some cultural similarities, there may be a lot of differences. And those nuances really need to be understood while you're making your evaluation into going into the market. The next slide, Les, the business model. So what kind of models do you look at in terms of international expansion? Well, there's the direct business. You go into a country, you set up an office, you hire people, and you have some type of sales channel, and you sell from that country. Now, manufacturing and all of that is different. It depends on if you have a software product, if you have a medical device, if what kind of product do you have, a technology product, what kind of product do you have, will determine if you start evaluating some type of manufacturing in that country as well. But your business model, are you a direct business? Do you have direct operations, direct sales in that country? Or are you going to use an agent? Are you going to use a distributor and have a distributor, you sell to the distributor sells to the end user? Or are you going to do something like some type of mixture in between? And there really are lots of different variations in terms of hybrid. What kind of model? Well, some of that will be predicated on the resources you have to invest. It's universally acknowledged that having a distributor network is substantially cheaper in the short term. You'll have fewer profits, but at least you'll have additional profits that you wouldn't have if you weren't in that locality. But it also limits you going down the road. So understanding which type of business model that you're going to use, and then understanding what's your potential exit is also important. Les, next slide. So business model, we have the import, like we just talked about, finished goods, subsidiary, acquisition, manufacturing, partnership. And I put manufacturing bullet point because I think it's just important to know if you have any type of technology product and you're going to do international business, usually some type of manufacturing in or near that locality will give you some type of tax benefit. But again, that really has to be researched. Are you going to do your own manufacturing operation with no local knowledge? Or are you going to do contract manufacturing? Or are you going to do something like an acquisition? That means buying a like company, potentially smaller or larger than your own. It really depends on your business model. And use their in-house resources for what you're going to do locally. That's very expensive, but that is the way to go in certain localities. Next slide, Les, the business plan. So the business plan is really, again, putting together putting together everything that we've already talked about in this format, and some type of format that's going to make sense for your team. So you start off with your basic country information and the opportunity that we've just talked about. Be as detailed as possible in what that opportunity is, and be able to quantify that opportunity. And that's something that's difficult to do, especially when the research you get is all secondary research. That's why you really need to invest in some type of local talent, or partner with an organization like iCAN-Global or International Directions, and that can really help you step that process up. Understanding your objectives, and that there are different objectives. There will be a corporate objective, there will be a finance objective, and there will be a marketing objective as well. And making sure that your plan and your strategies are in line with meeting all of these objectives. And everything you do should be in line with meeting these objectives. Your market overview, you especially in a new geography, want to understand what the social, political, economical climate is. Very, very key. It will determine a lot, because you can invest a lot in resources into going into a new country, and 6 months later, the country changes, their political climate or their social climate, or they go through a major downturn. So being aware and keeping aware. If you've done research on entering a market 2 years ago, that research is no longer valid. If you did research 6 months ago, that research is probably no longer valid. So keep it current. And then, of course, your standard SWOT analysis is just going to be key. Your product market overview, forecast, budgeting, and key strategies. All of these things need to be considered before, as you do your evaluation for your business plan. One of the things that I don't see a lot when companies are thinking about going into a new locality, I don't see any attention to an exit strategy. You need an exit strategy. It doesn't mean that you plan to stop selling in that business, but there is an end game. What is that end game? And it can mean a lot of things. I'll give you an example. I worked with a company that had a distributor in Russia. They didn't have an end game. They didn't have an end strategy, but this distributor did. And the distributor in Russia told them, I will do this business for 10 years. At the end of that 10 years, I'm going to sell it back to you. I'm going to sell you the entire business and you can open up a direct operation. They didn't plan for it. They didn't really consider it was serious because the business was doing so well. It was their largest performing market outside of their home territory. So they just thought business as usual. Within 9 years passed, the distributor said, okay, in a year from now, we need to probably start doing some groundwork now so that you can take over this business. They were completely unprepared. Their distributor actually was very kind, worked with them, obviously for a cash incentive, wanted to make sure they were successful when he, sold them back sold them his business that he had built for them. But again, they hadn't thought about this type of transaction, although he had told them from the beginning. Anyway, important to understand your exit strategy. Next slide, Les.
We're getting near the end, Roxanne.
Oh, 1 minute. Decision. Do you go or do you not go? Well, based on the information we just went over, you should have the ability to decide if you've done your research, if you've talked to who you've needed to talk to, and if you have your local expert, if this is a good or bad decision for your company and whether to go or not go.